The New West refers to the region settled west of the Mississippi after the Civil War. For a long time, the Great Plains region had been called the Great American Desert and was considered unfit for human habitation, except for Native Americans on reservations, that is. But that view changed in the last half of the 19th century with the discovery of gold, silver, copper, iron, and coal, the rise of the buffalo hide and cattle industries, and the new belief that the Great American Desert could be farmed after all. The idea of manifest destiny, that white settlement of the entire continent was an inevitable destiny, took hold, and by 1900, a third of the nation lived west of the Mississippi River. Homesteaders in the arid Great Plains, however, struggled to survive on small farms due to drought, while Native Americans were forced further west and struggled with new forced assimilation policies. The Homestead Act of 1862 granted settlers 160 acres in the Great Plains for the purpose of establishing small family farms and to integrate Western territories into the nation. New railway lines provided a way to ship their grain and cattle to distant markets. However, settlers in the West discovered that the Great Plains had very little rainfall despite a short-lived wet period in the 1880s. Without irrigation, only the native grasses and certain grain crops could withstand the harsh environment, and settlers discovered they needed at least 300 acres to grow grains to survive in the global marketplace of the late 19th century. Many homesteaders faced a grim struggle against elements including tornadoes, hailstorms, droughts, prairie fires, blizzards, and pests. Swarms of locusts often clouded the horizon, and a prolonged drought in the late 1880s forced many to give up. In the end, 2/3 of the people who gained land under the Homestead Act failed to become self-sustaining farmers. Large corporate farms commonly took the place of small family farms in the West. With the ability to pool capital, corporations could afford to install irrigation lines, buy machinery to harvest grain crops, and to establish ranches to graze cattle. In Central California, the Dakotas, and Minnesota, wealthy capitalists created gigantic bonanza farms that encompassed 10,000 acres and more. Wheat became a cash crop for export, much like cotton was in the South. American-grown wheat was exported around the world for corporate profit. The farm work in the West was increasingly done by thousands of migrant workers rather than small land-owning farm families as the homesteaders had envisioned. Few small farmers could afford the new machinery that made large-scale wheat farming profitable. Likewise, the open range, where small ranchers could graze cattle anywhere, was soon taken over by large ranchers who put up barbed wire fencing and shipped huge numbers of cattle by rail to be slaughtered in Chicago stockyards. By the 1890s, small farmers and ranchers were in open revolt against what they saw as a system of corrupt middlemen and greedy bankers who seemed to conspire against them. The dream of striking it rich by finding gold or silver continued to be the biggest draw for migrants to the West. But like agriculture and ranching, mining had also become a mass production industry dominated by large mining companies. Miners from the gold rush in California moved eastward into Utah and Nevada, drawn by one new strike after another. Many prospectors who hoped to strike it rich more commonly became wage earners for mining corporations. The pay was low and the work was dangerous. Overall, about 7,500 workers were killed and 20,000 maimed in mine accidents in the late 19th century. Once gold dust and nuggets had been sifted out of riverbeds, deep shaft mining required massive machinery and substantial capital investment. Mining companies used hydraulic mining, in which water was shot through a nozzle at high pressure onto the face of the cliff, to strip canyon walls of rock and topsoil in search for veins of gold or silver. About 12 billion tons of earth were blasted out of the Sierra Nevada and washed into local rivers.